The eye of the Category 4 storm was 24 kilometers southeast of Key West, bringing winds up to 210 kilometers per hour and threatening dangerous storm surges. The eye wall is where the most severe weather occurs while the eye of the storm is calm. The National Hurricane Center announced the arrival of the eye wall in their 7 a.m. advisory, 9 p.m. ED. This is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation, the National Weather Service in Key West said, urging those who had not heeded dire warnings to evacuate to take shelter now to protect your life. Collier County declared a civil emergency at 6 a.m. as tropical force winds gusts began blowing and warned that police, fire rescue and emergency services might not respond to service calls until the winds subsided. Ahead of the arrival of Hurricane Irma, many areas had already been feeling its impacts. Earlier Florida Governor Rick Scott tweeted that life-threatening storm surges were already impacting the Keys and were expected to spread to southwest Florida. Flooding of up to 4.5 meters, enough to cover a house, were expected and some areas are already experiencing heavy rain and hurricane-force winds. A tornado funnel cloud also formed off the coast of Fort Lauderdale on Saturday about 6:40 p.m. local time, with the U.S. National Hurricane Center warning that a few more were possible in South and Central Florida. Earlier the National Weather Service Key West said winds were imminent and told residents in the Florida Keys it is time to hunker down. In a tweet it advised people not to go outside, to get away from windows and to put your shoes on now. Hurricane Irma regained strength Sunday as it began pummeling Florida, threatening almost the entire southeastern U.S. state after cutting a deadly path of destruction through the Caribbean. The storm, packing of winds of 210 kilometers per hour, was upgraded to a Category 4 storm as it closed in on the island chain known as the Florida Keys. The eye of the storm is expected to hit the Keys between 7 to 8 a.m. EDT, 9 to 10 p.m. Sunday ED. Before moving near or along the peninsula state's west coast. It was expected to keep moving near or over the southwestern coast of the Florida Peninsula before traveling inland over the Florida Panhandle and southwestern Georgia on Monday afternoon. The storm's move to the west will potentially spare the highly populated areas of Tampa and Miami from the worst impacts. But St. Petersburg could get a direct hit instead. Neither St. Petersburg or Tampa have suffered a major hurricane in nearly a century. More than 6.3 million, nearly a third of Florida's population, have been ordered to evacuate. Florida Power and Light said more than 170,000 homes and businesses in the state had lost power, as the storm churned about 115 kilometers south-southeast of Key West. MacDill Air Force Base, the military installation home to U.S. Central Command, issued mandatory evacuation orders with the eye of the storm expected to pass near or over its home city of Tampa early Monday. The Kennedy Space Center was also closed. At least 25 people have been killed since Irma began its devastating march through the Caribbean earlier this week. Terrified Cubans who rode out Irma in coastal towns, after the storm made landfall Friday as a maximum-strength Category 5 storm on the Camagüey archipelago, reported deafening winds, uprooted trees and power lines, and blown rooftops. There were no immediate reports of casualties, but officials reported significant damage. A total of 1.5 million people were evacuated. Authorities in Havana were evacuating people from low-lying districts at risk from Atlantic storm surges. Enormous waves lashed the Malecon, the capital's emblematic seafront, causing seawaters to penetrate some 820 feet into the capital, AFP journalists found. Mass exodus in Florida. Cities on both the east and west coasts took on the appearance of ghost towns, as nervous residents heeded insistent evacuation orders. Irma is so wide that authorities were bracing for destructive storm surges on both coasts and the Keys. And hurricane-force winds are expected to lash the peninsula as it rolls north toward Georgia. On Highway 75 along the western coast of Florida, a steady stream of cars pressed northward as thousands fled at the last minute. Strip malls, fast food restaurants and retail giants were all closed for business. In Key West, police had opened a shelter of last resort for those who had ignored mandatory evacuation orders. Scott Abraham, who lives on the 5th floor of a beachfront apartment building in Miami Beach, is planning to ignore evacuation orders and ride the storm out with his wife and 2 kids. If I lived in a house I would have left, but if it gets flooded here it's going to take a week at least to come back. I don't want that, he said. Warning that Irma would be worse than Hurricane Andrew, which killed 65 people in 1992. Florida Governor Rick Scott said all 20.6 million Floridian